Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Welcome once again to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Good to have you along for the half hour. Please stick around. I can guarantee you're going to learn a lot, which is the intention of the show. Employment law, workplace rights is what we talk about here each week. I'm John Scholes. Joining me momentarily, employment lawyer Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. You can always reach out anytime you would like. You're asked to do so with any questions beyond this half hour. 1-855-821-5900. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. And there's a website that was constructed just to make you smarter. How nice is that? It's free, it's anonymous, it's called PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. Lots to cover on the show today. We'll try to get some phone calls from our radio shows, and our main topic in just a bit is going to be all about parental leave, maternity leave here in Ontario, so stick around for that. But we always get things warmed up, as Lior likes to say, with the week that was. Lior, what's going on? And welcome, pal. Good to have you back.
Hey, John, great to be here. Great to be talking about employment law. Such an important topic, such an important thing to cover, because we all have jobs, we all have these issues that may come up. Sometimes things go well, but not always. And if things are not going well right now for you, well, you'll need to know what to do. And it starts by watching us on the show. Whether you just lost your job and are worried, is that severance offer fair? Or should they have even let me go? Maybe your job is different now. Your hours have been changed, your work location. Maybe your boss is not treating you properly and you're fed up with it and starting to impact your health. What do you do about that? Well, it starts off on the show, and of course it can continue beyond the show just by reaching me in the office. Phone number and email addresses throughout the show, you'll get those. So don't hesitate to make that call, to send that email. But to get us all revved up today and started on this very important topic, let me tell you about a situation that came across my desk. I spoke with a lady who had a couple years ago been through a car accident, and since then she needed modified duty. As an employer provided that to her. It wasn't even that severe. She just needed some help lifting certain weights. If it was beyond a certain number of weight, she needed some help. She was able to do 90% of her job, frankly, even without accommodation, and things went fine. Well, very recently, her employer said, you know what, we never realized that you're going to need this accommodation for this long. We're going to stop doing that. So we expect you to be back to work at full capacity, or if not, you're going to have to consider you to have left or abandoned your job because you're not doing the job we hired you. So she called me and she wanted to know, what do I do here? Well, let's be very clear. That duty, that obligation to accommodate is so important. An employer has to do it. It's not a favor that they're doing the employee, it's a legal obligation. And if the employer doesn't accommodate, that's a human rights violation. Now, in this case, we know that the employer is able to accommodate. They've been accommodating her for a couple of years almost. So they can't say, well, now we've had enough. There's no time limit on accommodation. There's no statute of limitations. They have to accommodate as long as that accommodation is needed. So by refusing to accommodate and by telling her she's going to lose her job unless she's all of a sudden magically healthy, that's a human rights violation. They're going to owe her compensation. They're going to owe her severance. It's wrong and it's illegal. Remember, if you have a doctor's note that says you need accommodation, you need help, you need support, your employer has to make all efforts to provide that support. If they don't, that's illegal. You have to give me a call. We take that very, very seriously.
I think that doctor's note key part's important, Lior, because you can't simply walk into your boss and say, boss, hurt myself, I can't lift more than 50 pounds, or I need a nice new chair. Make it happen.
No,
right?
It's not enough that you, the employee, say what the accommodation is that you need. If your employer is okay with that, that's fantastic. But where the obligation gets triggered is with that doctor's note. So talk to your doctor, explain to them what you're feeling. Your doctor should be able then to give you a note saying, here's the accommodation that you need. Once you walk into that office of your employer with that note, they have to make it happen.
The website, EmploymentLawyer.ca, it's a beauty. It's where you want to go to catch one of our radio shows across the country on a weekly basis, pretty much daily basis, with Lior and I and a member of his team, including right here Sundays at 1 o'clock on our brother station, News Talk 1010. You'll catch our show. Call in, talk to us. We'd love to get you on the air. In fact, our first phone call, Lior, from one of our radio shows is coming up right now. Let's have a listen.
The past couple of years I've been on disability, and recently I've been thinking I feel a little bit better. I would really like to return to work. My anxiety now is, what if I return to work and I've heard horrific stories where people get laid off right away because company don't like people on disability.
How long have you been with this company?
16 years. I work within IT industry.
Okay.
45.
Well, I know the horror stories she's talking about because I've heard them as well, but let's talk about what the law is. Now listen, you can't physically restrain your employer and physically prevent them from letting you go. But man, oh man, are there going to be consequences if they let you go because you're on a disability leave. It's completely illegal to punish an employee, to let them go, to treat them badly because they had a medical condition or have one, or because they were off on a disability leave. It doesn't work that way. You cannot do that ever. And an employer that does that, they're going to have to pay significant damages. Now, we're of course going to also be getting severance in this situation, but beyond the severance, significant human rights damages, punitive damages, not legal. So don't worry about what your employer is going to do. If they don't abide by the law, there's going to be recourse. Now, of course, the question becomes always, well, how much severance is this person going to be owed? Let's go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca, use our severance calculator tool, and let's see how much severance she's owed. You can do the same thing for your situation. So an IT professional, been there for 16 years. We can see right on the bottom, she could be owed as much as 24 months severance, somewhere between that 18 to 24 month range. That's what severance would look for her. Now, especially if she's still struggling with her health, she may get something on the higher end of that range. So by the way, our severance calculator, free and anonymous. Check it out at PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca.
All right, pal, good opening salvo. We'll take a short break. On the other side, key components and key things to know about maternity leave, parental leave here in Ontario. That's all ahead on Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Stick with us.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Thank you so much for sticking around through that wee break. It's John Scholes here, and joining me again, Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. Reach out anytime. You're always encouraged to, as we say every week, 1-855-821-5900. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. All right, main topic. Let's get into this, Lior. You know what it is. Key points about maternity and parental leave here in Ontario. Number one, who qualifies for maternity or parental leave for that matter, and how long can that last?
So, first of all, parental leave, maternity leave, really what we're talking about here is a job-protected leave. It's a period of time during which your job, well, is protected. You have a right to your job back. So the law makes it very clear that there's a period of time, we'll talk a bit about that in a second, where your job is protected if you go on leave. Now, to qualify for that, if you're a mother, that's pregnant, it's about to have a baby, or if you're a father that's about to have a child, or if you're parents that have adopted a child, you qualify for that leave. Now, you have to have worked a certain minimum amount of time, 3 months, before the due date or before the child comes into your possession if you're an adopting parent, to qualify for that leave. And that leave can last up to 18 months. But that qualification is if you're becoming a new parent, congratulations, you qualify for a parental leave.
Can you be laid off or let go if you need that parental leave, if you're going to go on one?
So, first of all, that leave, as I said, up to 18 months of job-protected leave. But because it's a job-protected leave, you cannot be let go. Why? Because your job, well, it's protected. So generally speaking, you cannot be let go, you cannot be fired, you cannot have your employment be terminated because you're on that leave. All right? What I want you to remember, there may be situations that are extreme where something kind of unexpected happens that has nothing to do with you. The company shut down the whole department and they let everyone go in that department. Yeah, maybe in that situation you can be let go if you're about to come back to work. But in most cases, you cannot be let go. The company can't decide if they want to keep your replacement. If they don't bring you back to the same job and same pay, human rights violation, employment standards violation, illegal, can't do that.
So if we look down the road, Lior, 12 months, 18 months, maybe if it's the extended leave, what are the employee's rights when they come back to the job?
So it's not enough that you're taken back to work. We know that it's a job-protected leave, but the company doesn't really have discretion to put you in a different role. The expectation is you come back to the same job at the same pay. Now, beyond that, if the pay has changed while you're off, maybe the pay has increased for that job while you're off, you have to get that increased pay as well. Again, company can't decide to keep the replacement. They have to bring you back. And the other thing a company can't do is decide months before you're ready to come back to work that they don't have a job available for you. Unless they have a crystal ball or a clairvoyant, they're not going to be able to do that. They're expected to deal with this when you're ready to come back to work.
All right, good stuff, Leo. Let's roll on to another phone call. A reminder again, our radio shows can be found. Simply go to EmploymentLawyer.ca or PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. All kinds of resources to find us across the country, right here in the GTA as well. Join us, call in, be part of the conversation. Sundays, 1 p.m. on News Talk 1010. Here's our second phone call for the show right now.
I had a strange situation, just looking for advice. It's a relative, and he was employed at a charitable organization, so his boss is a board.
Yep.
And he was fired. And he was offered some severance, but it wasn't adequate. So he asked for more, and the offer was withdrawn. So he was given no severance. And so he's just wondering what to do next.
You know, believe it or not, John, I actually see this with non-for-profits often only because they may not have the legal expertise or the HR expertise to know how to properly deal with terminations. You know, they may do amazing work in their field, but that doesn't mean that they understand that they have obligations as an employer. No, an employer cannot just withdraw their severance offer unless they're offering you a lot more than what you were owed, because the law says they have to pay severance. So don't worry about that. If your friend in this situation is owed severance, he's going to get severance. It's not up to the company. The company doesn't decide how much severance you get or how much it should pay. The law takes care of that. And in the vast majority of cases, in over 90% of cases, the severance that you're offered is a lot less than what you're actually owed. So any of that deadline that you may have there, it's irrelevant. Your legal rights don't expire Friday at 5. Your legal rights are what they are. So take the time that you need to understand your rights, even if it means forgetting about that severance deadline. Nothing's going to happen. The key is not to accept a severance offer that's inadequate, because once you accept it, you're too late. It's too late to go back.
All right, we have lots more to go here, so stick around. We'll take a short break, including our third phone call, some emails, and other questions as well as we roll on with more Ask a Lawyer here on CP24.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
You betcha. Welcome back. Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. John Scholes, your host every week, and joining me, Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. Reach out to Lior and his team. They're always ready with a phone call, a conversation, and some answers. 1-855-821-5900. Email route is ask@EmploymentLawyer.ca. And if you go to EmploymentLawyer.ca, you'll find access to our many radio shows, including locally here, GTA, Sundays, 1 p.m. News Talk 1010. Join us for that show. It's a complete hour, and you'll have all kinds of opportunity to phone in, talk to us, and ask your questions. Your phone call may appear in this show, just like phone call number 3 for this show is coming up right now.
My wife, we ended up getting pregnant, so now she's doing 3 weeks, and then there was talk of her work relocating. They sent out a letter amongst the employees for them to sign. Either they want to be transferred or they want a package. They used to pay out 2 weeks per year for severance. Now they're saying they're only paying out 1 week.
So how long has she been there?
14 years, I believe. She's customer service. She's going to be 45 in November.
So, John, this all comes down to the relocation and how far they're relocating, how that's going to impact her. Let's say it's a minor relocation where they're moving, a couple blocks over. Well, the reality is that if she chooses not to do that, the law actually considers that to be potentially a resignation, and then she's actually not owed anything. But I suspect if they're talking severance, it's a more significant relocation. And the rule that I kind of follow is if it's going to impact your commute by an hour or more, this new location, then that's not something your employer can impose on you. And if you say no, you are owed severance. So in a situation where this is a significant relocation, you're owed severance, that's going to be a heck of a lot more than a week per year of service. So we're going to go back to our PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca tool. We're going to use our severance calculator one more time on the show. I want you to see how easy it is to find out how much severance you are owed. So this lady we're talking about here with the relocation, customer service representative, 14 years of service, 45 years of age, company saying a week per year of service, that's 14 weeks. Well, you see that she's owed somewhere north of a year's severance, 12 to 15 months of severance. That's what's at stake for her. So don't worry about this nonsense of a week per year. That's not the rule, that's not the law. Go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca, use their severance calculator, find out in seconds how much you're really owed.
I will give you another option to ask questions to Lior anytime. Join him on the live stream on Facebook and YouTube at stlawyers.ca, at stlawyers.ca. Here's a question for this week. Lior says, I was fired after HR learned that I'd brought marijuana to work in a travel bag. I never planned to smoke it at work and have never been high on the job. There's also no work policy for cannabis. Can they let me go just like that?
Well, you know, yes and no. So first of all, now that cannabis has been legalized, treat it like alcohol. An employer can certainly say you're not going to allow to have alcohol in the workplace. You can't bring it, you can't drink it. Same thing with cannabis. It's perfectly appropriate for an employer to have policy saying you can't, certainly you can't come into work high, that goes without saying, but you shouldn't even have it there. That's perfectly legal for an employer to say. But breaching that policy, bringing it to work when you're not supposed to, in itself, does not mean you could be fired for cause. If this is something you did and the company gave you a warning, you did it again and they give you another warning and then you still did it, well, maybe then they're in a position to let you go for cause. But one incident is almost never going to be enough to have your employment terminated for cause. So if the company still wants you gone, well, that's fine. But they're going to have to pay your full severance, and depending how long you've been there, that could be as much as 2 years' pay, John.
We have time to sneak in another email, but we're going to do that after the break, so stick around as we continue more of Ask a Lawyer here on CP24.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Anytime you want to reach out to Lior and his team, I'll give you the phone number first, 1-855-821-5900. Email works, try that one, ask@employmentlawyer.ca. And there's also that website, PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. Access to the severance calculator through there, absolutely free and anonymous as well. Leo, let's get to that email. As I mentioned before the break, it goes like this. My sister was lured away from her old job of 5 years by a competitor. But now her 40-hour work week has suddenly turned into 60 hours without extra pay. They say it's temporary. What can she do?
So there's a few things we need to break down here. So let's start with the basic notion that certainly changing your hours of work from 40 to 60, certainly not paying you more, is not something an employer is allowed to do. That's a big, big change. It's not what you signed up for. And putting you in that situation results in what we call constructive dismissal. That's the idea that your employer changed the deal, changed the terms of employment. They now are doing something that you never agreed to. And because of that, you can choose to treat that as a termination and get your severance. Now, here's the thing. They say it's temporary, and this person may say, you know what, if it's temporary, I'm okay helping them out for a little while. So here's what you do. Decide what you're okay with. Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 2? And write an email to the employer and say, employer, I'm not okay working 60 hours a week, but you told me it's temporary, so here's what I'm okay with. I'm okay doing this for the next month to help you out, and after that, I expect to go back down to 40 hours. And then that's fine. If that's what happens, okay, no problem, nothing bad happened. If after that month you're still not back to your regular schedule, then at that point you can consider that to be a constructive dismissal and still have the right to pursue your severance. So tell them that you're not okay, but it has to be in writing. You don't want it to be a situation where the company says, no, we assumed you're okay with this forever. You never said anything to us, so you have to put it in writing. Now, the last thing we have to touch on here is the fact that this person was recruited away from another job. We call this inducement. So we talked about that this could be a constructive dismissal and she may be owed severance. Well, if she was recruited away from another job, now she's owed severance, she could be owed enhanced severance that recognizes her time with the previous company. That's how it works. If you're recruited away from a job and then are let go, let's say in the first 2 or 3 years with a new company, they have to almost recognize your previous years, and that may mean a lot of severance. So a lot of things to unpack here, but it starts by telling the company that you're not okay having your hours increased that way.
Okay, question for Lior. I mean, never any good at math, but 40-hour work week to a 60-hour work week, they might not want to pay her anymore, but now is she not beyond that 44-hour threshold? So overtime's there regardless, no?
If she's in a position that qualifies for overtime, let's say she's not a manager, she's not in IT, she's not a doctor, then she qualifies for overtime. And overtime has to be paid if you work more than 44 hours a week. Whether you're a salaried employee or an hourly employee, you get overtime over 44. And by the way, let's expand on that a bit. You get overtime if you work more than 44 hours, even if your employer does not ask you to work. Now, in this case, they asked her to work it. But even if they don't, they may tell you don't work overtime. But you worked it because it had to be done, the work had to be finished, and you had to stay the extra hours, so you worked 52 hours this week. Well, those 8 hours have to be paid at time and a half. The company doesn't get to avoid that. Now, again, managers, for example, are not don't qualify, they're exempt. Certain professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, IT professionals, but most people do qualify for overtime after 44 hours.
And if I'm unsalaried, how do I figure out my overtime? Hourly is easy.
Hourly is easy, it's time and a half, but it's just as easy, frankly, with salary. Whatever your weekly salary is, you divide that by 44. That's your regular hourly rate. 1.5 times that is your overtime rate. Big misconception that people think, well, no, overtime is really just for hourly employees, not salary. Wrong, false. Salaried employees absolutely qualify for overtime as well.
And that is why he does the math on this show, because he figured it out really simply. So there you go. We are just about out of time for this half hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Always reach out as we wrap up each week with the contact information. It's 1-855-821-5900, cp24.com/ask-a-lawyer, and then ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. And that website, it was built to make you smarter. Remember this, at all times, free and anonymous. Access to the severance calculator as well. That would be pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. And then finally, join us this Sunday, 1 p.m. News Talk 1010. We're doing a bit of radio, and we want you to be with us and make some phone calls. We'll catch you next time on Ask a Lawyer right here on CP24.